Great. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and you're back here to speak with us again. Again, Jamie Frankowiak. I run the CRM product team at Affinity. And this topic today is actually really close to my heart. Prior to joining Affinity, I spent about a decade at GLG running operational success there and was our first CS ops lead at Affinity before moving to product. And being an operational hero is not easy. It's no small feat. It can be incredibly challenging to change people's behavior, despite the fact that we can all see what a benefit it would be to both them and to their firm. So today, we brought two operational heroes that we've partnered with over several years at Affinity, and we'll be walking through what their worlds looked like before and after implementing Affinity, how they drove visibility and adoption to their strategies, and where they extended Affinity beyond the CRM web app to drive additional value and impact. We'll save some time for Q&A at the end, so please get those questions ready. So, Nolan, great to have you here. Way back from the days when I was your CSM many moons ago. Would love to hear just a little bit more from you to share with the audience about your role at SOSV.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. It's great to be here. It's great to see all of you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I've been with SOSV for almost 9 years now. It's been quite a bit of time. Started on the investment-facing side, and then about 4 years ago, I switched over to the back office operation side of the house. I would summarize my role as dual-facing. I work very closely with our founder community. SOSV is a very active seed stage investor. We have about 800 operating portfolio companies currently, and we invest in about 100 to 130 new companies every year. And so I oversee all of the onboarding onto the SOSV platform. I help, support founders, on anything that's essentially outside of the scope of the GP that's responsible for their company. And then I also work very closely with our IT team on all of the different systems and platforms that SOSV uses to manage a portfolio of that size.
Thanks, Nolan, and great to have you here today. Caroline, it's been great to meet you in the process of preparing for this and great to meet in person today. Would love to hear a little bit more about your role at APC.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. It's great to be here. Great to be with you, Nolan. And thanks everyone for being here. I'm Director of Operations for ABC. I've been with the team for also about 9 years. And I, similarly to Nolan, I'm dual-facing. A lot of what I do is internal investment team operations. So everything on the investing side that isn't actually diligencing, deploying capital, issuing term sheets. So I partner really closely with our investment team on their processes and with our portfolio companies in supporting everything that isn't the GP's responsibility.
All right. So for many of the people in the room, the implementation of Affinity marks a demarcation in how your firm deals with deals and relationship data. And because we want this session to be a visual one, we've asked Nolan and Caroline to bring in some visualized versions of what their tech stacks looked like before and after the implementation of Affinity. So let's take a look. Caroline, let's start with you and your team at APC.
Yeah, great. So before Affinity, we were using a CRM that was really built and intended for use for sales teams. So something that we were really kind of forcing our way into. The CRM itself was Relate IQ, is now Salesforce IQ, housed some important information, but really only siloed specific pieces of information. So we could have the company name, the CEO name, email, internal lead, the status, and, kind of a note for next steps or a status even for next steps. But so much lived outside of the CRM and outside of the platform, notes, pitch decks, emails back and forth, updated context on the communication and the relationship as it was evolving. It required our team to access multiple points in our tech stack to see the full relationship or the kind of get the full context of a deal and where it stood or historically the relationship. And it kind of it meant that a lot of our team didn't kind of go through each step and didn't get the full context. We were duplicating efforts. We looked kind of silly reaching out to founders from multiple points internally. And it really just kind of created a lot of friction both internally and externally that it it, I think, affected our ability to operate.
And I was actually speaking with someone at lunch and starting a new fund, about 5 people, and he's kind of trying to make a decision of, when is that tipping point for us where we start really adopting technology or hiring someone to really focus on operations. What was that tipping point for APC?
It's a good question. I think that when I joined 9 years ago, it became clear pretty immediately that we were going to need software to help us see the full 360 view of our relationships, both on an organizational and an individual level. I might be a little bit biased, but I would say to this individual, the sooner the better. The sooner you build the architecture, the sooner that you kind of, put the work in on a CRM like Affinity, the easier it is long term, and the less kind of clunkiness you experience along the way.
So tell us a little bit more about where you are today.
Yeah,
it's changed.
Yeah. So now we are very, very happy Affinity users. Affinity, as most of you know, is a great single source of truth, because not only does it, can you upload data and kind of house information, but it's the smart CRM that sits on top of your email, that sits on top of your calendar, and that, pulls information from every member of your team. So it means that there's one source of truth. It houses pitch decks, email communication back and forth, the history of a relationship. So it doesn't, it's not like a snapshot in time. You can see the whole life of a relationship. And it also means that, we don't have to kind of bug each other for information. You can see it all in one place. And it makes us, it streamlines everything, and it makes us really better partners to our network, because we're not duplicating our efforts and we're not duplicating theirs as well.
And Nolan, would love to hear a little bit more about kind of what the world looked like at SOSV before you adopted Affinity, and of course, if there's any differences or similarities to what Caroline experienced.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot more chaotic than it is today, that's for sure. When I joined SOSV, I think we had about 150 portfolio companies, and that grew very quickly. And we evolved from, a pretty small family office pretty much to an institutional venture capital firm. And so we quickly had to roll out a tech stack that, that could help us manage a portfolio of that size. And very similar to Caroline, we had all of these different tools that were out there. We had teams that were using separate processes for different things and so it was kind of a mess. It was really hard. We're a very distributed firm. We're about 160 people now, but we're spread out all over the world. And so there was just a lack of transparency that Affinity has really helped with. It makes it really easy to keep things organized, keep people on the same page, make sure conversations are getting tracked appropriately, documents are being stored, and it also just makes it a lot easier for us to, grab data requests that come through. Before Affinity, it was really hard. Even simple data requests, it was hard to pull that together for someone. And I'm embarrassed to tell you some of the requests that we got because, it sounds super simple, but we couldn't do it easily. So it was a huge headache. So Affinity has been a huge help as well, just keeping us afloat and making sure that everyone stays organized and on the same page.
So we'd love to just get into this a little bit more. And you shared this visual of kind of what the tech stack looks like at SOSV. So if you could walk us through some of it and kind of tell us how you've ended up setting things up.
Yeah, so I know that this is a little complicated, but essentially you can see Affinity down at the bottom. Unlike some other firms, we have a pretty sizable engineering team. That's been great in terms of building some tools internally for us to use. And so when we decided to start using Affinity, it was something that we really wanted to incorporate into the tech stack. And Affinity was almost like that missing puzzle piece for us. So we had some things that we had built, some things that, that we were just purchasing and using. And then Affinity helped us kind of bring everything together. I'm not going to talk too much about our community portal, which is at the top there. That's a custom platform that we built in 2016 for our founders and staff. I'll get into that later. But you can see down below, we've got 2 applications, I guess, coming into Affinity. One is actually our application. So SOSV gets about, anywhere between 1,000 and 5,000 applications per year for investment, essentially, or to participate in one of our programs. And so now all of that data gets funneled into Affinity. and it allows us to track everything in there, track conversations with prospective applicants. It allows us, again, to pull data requests on applicants and also review applications in Affinity. And then we also have an invest form on our website. This is something that actually gets a lot of activity. It's just an inbound invest form. People can submit it either if they're interested in investing in our companies or our funds. It's a tool that our investor relations team uses pretty heavily, and now all of that gets funneled into Affinity as well. And so the IR team can actually use Affinity to process these requests, update statuses, and then move them along through the firm depending on what they reached out for. So that's been great. And then I'll talk more about our founder portal in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of, even just kind of thinking about the application and invest form process, can you tell us a little bit more about how long it took to get this set up and kind of what that implementation process looks like? And, it appears that you're integrating a lot of platforms, probably using the API. I know you have an engineering team. And so kind of what resources and timeline did it really take to get both this set up and for the different teams across the world to adopt it?
It was definitely an iterative process. We learned a lot along the way. I would say it probably took about a year for us to incorporate everything together, and then maybe another year and a half for everyone to start using it effectively. And that still isn't 100% yet. So something that I continue to work on is just making sure that people are using all of the tools that we've made available. But yeah, we were probably one of the first customers to really heavily use the API. It's been great to see all of the improvements as well over the years. But we use the Affinity API very heavily. We have information syncing to Affinity and out of Affinity pretty regularly. So the API was really important for us as well.
And so for some of these technology transformations, it's a lot of change and it's a big investment, especially from your senior leadership team. And so as you think about kind of using technology to overhaul how you're doing fundraising and deal flow and portfolio support, I expect you really need that leadership buy-in to be able to kind of support all of this change and the timelines and resources it takes to make it. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on this, Caroline, in terms of how you made the light of Affinity really shine to the senior leadership team. I heard earlier in the panel, one of the attendees said that if you report in the tool is important, which I think you've had experience with that too. So would love to hear a little bit more about some of the things that kind of naturally developed within your teams to show that light.
Yeah, I was really kind of happy to hear on the panel earlier the 2 points. One was that if you report in the tool, then it becomes important, which is so true. But also talking about projecting the platform in meetings, using it to drive meetings. And because it shows, you see it, it's in front of your face, you can see what it can do in real time. And we found that to be a key driver as well. I use the portal to drive our deal flow meetings, to kind of go through the deal pipeline. I have a deal list that I've created, individual views for each one of our investment team members. And so that they can see their active deals at any given point. And what I do is I email them the link to their view so that they have to log in and they can see it. And it kind of, I hope, empowers them to update their list in real time so that, they feel the ownership, but they know that whatever they do in Affinity will be seen across the firm, and it's the source of truth, so it updates in real time. But it was really nice to kind of have that validation from the partner level, because we've seen that as well. Another thing that we've done internally, and what you're seeing on the screen right now is the result of one of our rockstar EAs and kind of the dashboard one of the dashboards that she has built for her executives using Affinity Analytics. So she's identified the most important relationships to her partner, or partners, as it were, and where they fit in the network. What kind of relationship is it? How should it be maintained? How should it be cultivated? And this is something that she built on her own, kind of seeing the value in Affinity, or value of the platform. So the more that you kind of push it in everybody's face, use the platform to drive meetings, use reporting, I've found that you don't always realize who's listening and who sees the value. And they create, these dashboards and kind of other process themselves that I hadn't kind of thought of before. And so it's created some really great workflows internally. And this is something that she actively maintains for her partner and sends it to him and to them kind of on a regular cadence. So it's great. You can PDF it and, have it schedule send, or you can send it yourself kind of automatically. And it's something that they use. And again, reporting drives them on the partner level back to the platform. And we've seen huge value there, but we've also seen a big increase in platform adoption as a result.
And I love when this kind of grassroots effort happens here too, where some of these nuggets of really great ideas actually don't come from the operational hero. And so would just love to hear a little bit more about how you empowered your team to really kind of champion and be the owner of these new ideas and ways of using Affinity.
Yeah, I think Affinity does a really good job on its own. There's so much information and so much data that is captured and updated in Affinity that we try to then use that data and that information to empower our EA team, our IR team, our really investment team, whomever, and show them what it can do. Show them how they can kind of create that added layer of value to their team, to their executive, whatever the case may be, and that it doesn't, at the time, it didn't have to be me. I didn't, Affinity wasn't my tool. I tried really hard to market to the team that Affinity is the firm's tool. It's ABC's tool. It's not something that I use, that I power for everybody else. It's something that we can all do together. And I think that in particular, the EA team really took hold of that and have, I say internally a lot, they've become more chiefs of staff than EAs. And I think that Affinity has really empowered them to do that.
And Nolan, I know, SOSV is such a large and distributed company, and so would love to hear just about any experiences you've had with this at SOSV and, what any team members that have come up with really great ideas, shown you maybe how to leverage technology in new ways and what you did to try and spread that across other teams.
Yeah, I think it was definitely challenging. I think we have Affinity users in maybe 11, 12 different countries. So it's not like I could pull everyone into a room for a couple hours and do some basic trading on the platform. So I had to be pretty strategic with the rollout. I started with different investment teams, making sure that they were comfortable with the platform. Very soon, we had a few users on the investment teams that were doing things in Affinity that I didn't even know were possible. So learned a lot from them as well. And then I was able to showcase sort of the cool things that they were working on and that they were doing to other teams that were maybe a little more hesitant about using Affinity and a little more reluctant about, swapping out a new tool or an old tool for a new tool. So it took some time. It probably took, I would say, probably 2 years before I was happy with engagement and usage and really kind of justified the cost of the platform. And now it's become something that, all of our teams are using for the most part, and it's become pretty integral to a lot of different workflows across the firm. So it took time for sure, but it was just patience, and then definitely leveraging some of the really talented power users that we have at the firm that I couldn't have anticipated.
And so for both APC and SOSV, we see Affinity kind of as the hub of your tech stack. But I know you've found ways to leverage the data and insights even outside of the CRM itself. And so would love to hear a little bit more about those experiences. And Nolan, would love to take this opportunity to kind of tap a little bit more into that community portal and what you built for SOSV.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is the community portal. This is what we call it at SOSV. It's essentially a platform that we built for founders. It's something that all of our founders get onboarded to within the first maybe 2 weeks of their initial investment. And then it's something they have access to, in perpetuity. And so you're looking at two things. You're looking at a snapshot from the portal, our startup directory. So again, we have a list of all the companies we've invested in. You can expand details. You can find out more about the company. You can reach out to the founders. So all of that lives in the portal. And then you'll see an Affinity list on the right, which essentially is our portfolio list, which essentially mirrors what you see in the portal. So any portfolio company first has to get added to Affinity, and then they get onboarded into this founder platform, this portal. And then what I love about this is that all of this stuff is editable by founders. So a founder can go in, they can access their profile, they can update it, they can change it, and then that will all sync back to Affinity. So it sort of reconciles both platforms. We never have data that's, out of date or inconsistent. Everything stays, consistent across both platforms. And so that's how, that's one way that we use Affinity. We are pulling all of our portfolio data back into the platform from our community portal.
And Nolan, I found this so fascinating because as a data provider ourselves, and we heard Andy talk a little bit earlier about, job changes and getting that, in under 2 weeks now. It's really hard. It's a challenge. And we've made a lot of investments in finding kind of the highest quality data and the most up-to-date information on some of these things. And no better source than getting it straight from your founders who are highly invested in making sure that you have the most up-to-date information on them. So, what have you been able to do with that, once it's in Affinity? How are you also able to kind of leverage the freshness of that data?
A couple ways. So yeah, to your point, it's great. The founders obviously are the source of truth. And so we want the most accurate information coming from them. And then I didn't mention, but this is sort of also the back end of our website. So every portfolio company has a marketing profile that they can update in the portal. That's also syncing back to Affinity. So everything stays consistent. But having this data in Affinity just allows users or our staff at SOSV to really easily pull, data requests, statistics, et cetera, about the portfolio. It's a lot more user-friendly. So it's just, I would say it's like probably the primary place people will go to if they, need to pull a segment of the portfolio or have specific portfolio questions.
And Caroline, I know you've learned a lot about this as we've kind of prepared for this discussion. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on, to what extent you feel like this might apply to your portfolio work at APC.
Yeah, no, it's been great kind of getting to know both you and Nolan through this and hearing a lot about how SOSV utilizes a tool in different ways, a lot of similarities, but some differences as well. And I think that the one place in Affinity that we probably haven't done a great job is thinking through some of the other tools that we use and how we can kind of automatically connect Affinity. And we think a lot about how we can import data, but kind of the automatic syncing of some of our tools and different parts of our tech stack that I'm now really excited to kind of take back to the team and see how we can implement similarly to SOSV.
Well, Caroline, I do know there's one area that you're super passionate about in terms of working outside of the Affinity web app. You're a heavy user and big advocate of the Pathfinder tool. So would love to hear a little bit more about how you've used that particular app in conjunction with the CRM, kind of what you're doing in one versus the other.
Yeah, I think the Pathfinder is fantastic. Shout out to Canal for building a really great product and feature. We, as kind of our culture, lives a lot in email. It's just how we communicate. It's kind of how we do two things. And so Pathfinder has been really invaluable for me to both update context and information in the platform directly in email. So I'm not, toggling back and forth between the two, but also quickly see, I don't know, I might be processing a potential deal and I can quickly see, oh, wait, this is already on the deals list. We've seen it before. I can quickly see who owned it. When's the last time we met? Everything lives in the email, and I have kind of both the CRM and the context of the body of the email in the same spot. And so it cuts down a lot on my workflow there. I can easily add, notes. I can easily add files, update status, update owner. And it's so nice not to have to leave my email for the ability to do that and for the updated context. There are certain things in the platform that it's just much easier. It's a bigger screen. There's more information. I can merge. I can kind of see the whole timeline of a relationship. And so there's certainly a place in a world in which they're both equally valuable. I think that for my colleagues, that one of the biggest places we were talking earlier about driving usage has been Pathfinder. For whatever reason, kind of the sticking point for some has been logging onto a new platform or kind of creating that workflow. But the Pathfinder allows them to do it sort of in step. And I've driven a lot of usage as well that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we look at it from our side as well, and we have really actually great retention kind of across the different applications, but Pathfinder specifically is probably the stickiest application that we actually have. Really, once people start using it, they use it consistently and continually.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You don't have to change your workflow and you don't have to step out of what you're already doing in order to be extremely productive in the CRM.
So as expected, though, there's overlap, I'm sure, as well. So there's kind of an either or where certain tasks and workflows can happen in both places. It's just about kind of where your fingertips are at the moment. Can you just tell us a little bit more about kind of where you see that overlap?
Yeah, I mean, you can update, context, and you can update status or owner, or add to a list, or kind of tag in either. And I find that it depends on where the information lives. Does it live in email? Yes, then Pathfinder is the obvious answer. If you're getting it real time from a conversation or you're pulling it from somewhere else, then it's nice to have the platform. I think that one of the great values of Affinity is to be able to do either, and you can almost do everything in both.
And Nolan, same thing for you. I know you've kind of been learning a lot about the use cases for Pathfinder that Caroline has had. Any kind of ideas that come to light for you in SOSV in terms of how you're using it today versus how you might be able to use it in the future?
Yeah, well, I definitely want a crash course from Caroline after this. Because it definitely sounds useful. It's not something that has been hugely adopted across SOSV, but I think it's also something that not everyone's aware of. Not all of our users are aware of. So again, would just be a matter of, putting together some use cases and training. And I think it's a little more straightforward to use in the CRM, at least for new users. But yeah, just definitely interested in learning more.
And so I want to take a pause here. I know we've got a lot of other operational heroes in the room, people who are kind of maybe aspiring operational heroes who are building that tech stack, who are thinking about whether or not to hire somebody to help them with here. And so would love to just take a pause here, open up for questions, see if we can get some discussion going. So I think we've got Mike over there. If anyone wants to kind of raise your hand, grab it, and leverage their panelists here.
I know you guys didn't touch specifically on this, but under kind of leveraging your tech stack, do either of you have experience with the integration with Notion? We use Notion currently for a lot of community pages, and I can see that there is overlap with what Affinity offers, and I'm trying to deduplicate workflows, right? So someone's not creating something on Notion and then having it also live in Affinity. So I didn't know if you guys specifically had any experience with that platform.
A lot of today is focused on Affinity's great value when it comes to portfolio companies and how folks on your side are engaging there. Maybe outside of the Affinity space, where else are you feeling pain? I know this was a question this morning, how tech can be leveraged. It was all, props to Affinity. It's all very CRM focused. I mean, help us from the ops side understand more about what else is a pain point where you think more can be done.
In Affinity specifically or just in general?
Preferably the latter.
Yeah, it sounds like outside. So non-Affinity problem.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to a few people at lunch about this, but one thing that we struggle with, or it's not struggle necessarily, but it is a pain point, is collecting information from founders, financial information. We ask all of our founders, our CEOs, to submit monthly financial reports, and compliance is not where we would love it to be. And so we were just talking about, someone threw out Standard Metrics as, potential platform, but also just thinking through how do you incentivize founders to give you information regularly. We're a minority investor, so a lot of the time, there isn't a whole lot we can do or enforce in terms of compliance. So that's something that always comes to mind.
Yeah, if you figure that out, please let me know. That's pretty top of mind for me as well right now, is quarterly reporting and kind of the compliance and gathering the information without being too much of a burden to our founders, or at all a burden, but understanding our fiduciary duty to our own investors and our own reporting. Another place that I find kind of a pain point regularly is how often to share information or potential partnerships or conferences, things with our portfolio companies without inundating them to the point where they ignore me, but still adding value and surfacing things that might be important to them. And so kind of thinking through, does that look like a Slack channel? Does that look like an email group that you opt into, or a founder portal? I don't know yet, but that's also something that is pretty top of mind for me right now.
I mean, would love to hear if anyone in the room has any great ideas around those areas. Has anyone kind of found a good solution for either portfolio company reporting or communication for some of those suggestions? I've got a question for both of you, actually. Kind of speaking about the product vision and Andy's discussion from earlier today. Is there something kind of in the future that he's mentioning that like you're just most excited about that you could see the team using? Carolyn, maybe start with you.
Yeah, the community, the lists, the shared lists. I forget the exact name of it, but that I was so excited to hear that. It's something that I think we and maybe everybody has been asking for over the years. But the ability for our investment team to share these lists from a BD perspective with our portfolio companies, where we're helping intros, et cetera, the ability to kind of have Affinity remain our source of truth and update in real time, but also help our portfolio companies in the ways that we are and kind of do it from one place. Really excited for that.
Nolan?
Yeah, excited about that as well. Really excited about the deal insights. We pay for a lot of additional platforms like PitchBook, CB Insights, that are pretty expensive. And I would love to bring all of that into one place and consolidate the number of tools that our teams are using. And then I know there was more. It was really, really
the note taker.
Yes.
Also, hugely. A lot of our team uses their own different. They each have a favorite AI note taker, and to have it all in Affinity again, and just have, I keep saying it, but the one source of truth, and not having to update multiple locations. I'm excited to kind of roll that out to the team as well.
I want to go back out to the audience here. Great question.
Yeah, to answer your question, you were asking if there were any recommendations on how to improve the portfolio reporting regarding the financial metrics and the compliance around it. So I'm from Westbury. We just partnered up with Affinity today. You must have heard about us in Ray's keynote. So happy to show you our solution and show you how you can get on top of your portfolio performance.
There you go. Thank you so much for calling that out.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the group? Any kind of questions coming up? Things that you're trying to do within your firms that maybe these two have experienced and could provide some feedback on?
What advice or tips do you have for folks starting out with the analytics portion of Affinity? Like where to start, or what are some pitfalls that you would recommend your younger self to not do?
That's a great question. Analytics is an amazing tool that I found not to be intuitive at all. And I don't come from a technical background, so it didn't sort of make sense to me. Our CSM, Arda, has been phenomenal. And I would suggest I just sat down with her and I said, can you please give me the basics of this? And she gave me kind of the foundational building blocks to understand what it can do and how the language works. And I've been able to kind of build a lot on top of that. So I think I would go back to myself and say, stop banging your head against the wall trying to figure it out yourself, and ask somebody who knows, and then work from there.
Are there certain things that you're looking to, what's the most important kind of analytics that you're trying to run in your firm right now?
Really starting with the basics of, how many companies are we looking at in each industry, or things of that nature, just really low lift, and then thinking, okay, what else would be helpful beyond that?
Yeah, sometimes seeing those foundations are going to spark some new ideas. So, yeah, I know that came a lot in the preparation, because, I was just saying how great it was, that they've developed kind of new use cases for some of our analytics, and you really are singing Arda's praises on how much she's supported you through that.
Great. We have, to your point, we have a dashboard that I created that shows the insights of, from a quarterly perspective or whatever timeline you want, of industry, stage, number of deals, geography, all kind of the high level basic metrics. But then also built on, you kind of build on top of that. And I built an analytics view of all of the open deals for all of our investment team members. And it PDFs and auto sends 3 times a week, so everybody can see everybody else's open, what's open in the firm right now. And so it's created this appetite, I think, for analytics. And so I have now other people kind of building, you saw earlier, but building their own platforms. And so again, like going back to your initial question, like it didn't have to just be me learning it and mastering it, kind of learning the basics and sharing it with the team, and then becomes collaborative.
So this is my favorite question. But you've both been at your companies for a significant amount of time. You've seen a lot of digital transformation, and kind of looking in hindsight, would love to hear if there's something you would have done differently. Now being where you are in your chairs today, maybe you like tackled earlier, tackled sooner, tackled in just a different way with a different perspective, based on kind of the knowledge that you have now. So seeing head nods from both of you, I'll let you decide who wants to go first on that.
A lot. Where to start? I think introducing a tech stack earlier, when I came on board, we were still using all of these disparate systems, and people were sort of in charge of how they wanted to, own their workflow. And there was very little organization or cohesion across the firm. And so I think, introducing things from day one of when I joined would have made my life a lot easier when we were at, 200 portfolio companies instead of 800 or 900. Because then you just have so much more data that you're managing and you're having to input and extract, and it got messy. It takes a lot more time. The more mature you are, the more portfolio companies you have, larger AUM. So yeah, I think it's never too early to start introducing technology and some automation and cohesion and organization. Don't wait till you're just at that point where it's like everything is going to set on fire, or, yeah. So, yeah, never too early is my motto.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to kind of piggyback on top of that, as we have introduced new technology and new platforms, or even, platforms like Affinity that we've been using for a long time, really being thoughtful. I wish I'd been more thoughtful at the beginning, instead of just being so excited for the platform to just run, to think of the architecture and what I wanted it to look like long term and how it could scale from the beginning. Jamie, you and I were talking about this during lunch, that, I don't know, 4 years ago or so, I completely reworked our Affinity architecture. We had 150 lists or something, and each list had 5 people in it, or it was really not the smartest architecture. And so it would have been a lot easier than, to be really thoughtful about it at the beginning and thinking longer term, than reworking it in the middle.
All right, I think we'll leave it there. We do have, of course, adoption, trying to drive adoption of the tools that you've implemented and are encouraging your team to use, is something that's a big part of being an operational hero. So we'll just leave you with a few tidbits that Caroline and Nolan had shared in terms of how they kind of drove more value and adoption out of Affinity based on their experiences. So definitely feel free to grab them on the side. Thank you both so much for speaking for this. And yeah.